Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and you know how Pokemon Go just held a big event where you could catch legendaries off of incense to celebrate 30 years of Pokemon? Well, somewhat unsurprisingly, there was a bug with this event, and that meant that a few trainers were actually able to get Great League eligible versions of legendaries that they weren't supposed to have. Now that includes today's battle submitter Maki DK, who got a Great League eligible Kyurem. Now once Niantic did realize the mistake, they did end up banning those legendary Pokemon that were not supposed to be Great League eligible from the Great League, but before that ban went through, Maki was actually able to get a couple sets recorded. So for the first and maybe last time, let's check out Kyurem in the Great League. Picking up a terrible lead in game number 1, Kyurem into Shadow Galarian Weezing. Safe switch into the Corviknight unanswered from the opponent as they stay in to connect with the Brutal Swing and then retreat into their own Corviknight. Brutal Swing is some nice chip damage onto the Corviknight, but the important thing for Maki is that Brutal Swing does not put him into payback range. The opponent will still need to fire off an Air Cutter afterwards if they want the KO, and that means for Maki, this is a very safe no-shield. Payback lands, that does get the Corviknight low, but Corviknight not in any danger of getting Sand Attack down. Payback lands onto the opponent. Can the Sand Attack down happen? Not before the Air Cutter is reached. Maki is going to be playing for switch advantage, as the Shadow Galarian Weezing is going to have a pretty tough time going up against the Clodsire in the back. Opponent reveals their final Pokemon. It's a Gastrodon. That is a Pokemon that I haven't seen in quite a while. Gastrodon did get Mud Slap nerfed, and it absolutely feels every part of that nerf. Suddenly, Gastrodon is not nearly as scary as it once was. Kyurem is going to be giving up the final shield. There's the switch into the Shadow Galarian Weezing, and that's going to be answered with the Clodsire. Shadow Weezing is up 2 shields, but is forced to go for Brutal Swings in this matchup, and the bulk of Clodsire is its best friend as Brutal Swing after Brutal Swing can connect, and Clodsire just really does not feel the damage. Clodsire not even going to go for the Earthquake, just going to go straight for the Sludge Bomb. This will still do quite a lot of damage. Opponent no shields. They're trying to close out the game with the Gastrodon. They're able to make a last-second Brutal Swing. Switch timer will now be up. They should look to pivot into the Gastrodon, and they do, but it's immediately answered with the Kyurem. Kyurem applying this Glaciate debuff so early is going to be big, because suddenly the Gastrodon is not going to be hitting nearly as hard. If you thought Mud Slap post-nerf didn't do a lot of damage, wait until it's a -2 Mud Slap. Suddenly this Kyurem looks absolutely invincible. Gastrodon goes for the Body Slam. That does absolutely nothing, and Kyurem makes a third Glaciate. Kyurem just taking over this game. Glaciate lands. There's the switch into the Clodsire. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Hopping into game number 2, picking up what I imagine should be a pretty decent lead, Kyurem into Charjabug. Before Charjabug can even have the energy for one X-Scissor, Kyurem's already spamming out the Glaciate, getting big damage and applying an attack drop. These Dragon Breaths are shredding through the Charjabug as well. Kyurem's going to be putting up the shield as X-Scissor comes through. Charjabug overfarms. Kyurem's going to go for the Captai. Kyurem does not want to let any extra damage land. Glaciate takes the knockout. Opponent's going to be sending in Florges. If Florges is on Trailblaze and Chilling Water, then they're actually completely walled by the Kyurem. Kyurem gets the shield with the Glaciate. There's a pivot out into Corviknight. Opponent reveals their final Pokemon is Shadow Dusknoir, and Corviknight will go for the bait. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of this bait because the Corviknight's already up energy, and that's why, because the opponent may feel like they have to call a bait as their only win con. Now, they get to fire off the Shadow Punch. That does some pretty significant damage, and Corviknight's doubling down. If at first you don't succeed, go for the bait once again, but it's 2 for 2 bait calls from the opponent. Thankfully, Corviknight has enough energy that it's able to make a third Air Cutter. That's going to pressure a shield from the Dusknoir. Switch timer's up. Corviknight just misses the farm down as Dusknoir survives on 1 HP. Shadow Punch will be the end of the Kyurem, but Clodsire in the back should be able to take home this win. Timer hits 0. In comes Clodsire, getting the Poison Sting down. Back in comes the Florges. Florges has a lot of energy. It's going to be able to fire off Chilling Water, but the Corviknight was preserved, and Corviknight will be able to switch in, reset the -2 attack drop back to 0, and then Sludge Bomb will be lethal. And there it is, switching into the Corviknight. Now the Sludge Bomb is back to full power, and this Florges has no way out. Sludge Bomb lands, devastating damage. Florges playing it out to the bitter end. They are refusing to top left, but I think with one more Poison Sting, that should do it, getting the farm down and taking the win. We move to game number 3, Kyurem now leading into Jellicent, and I imagine this is not a great lead for the Kyurem. Jellicent has a pacing advantage already at the Shadow Ball before that Dragon Claw is available. Kyurem not the bulkiest before it applies a debuff, so it will put up the shield, and now the opponent is going to be safe switching into Florges. Florges immediately debuffed by the Glaciate. Glaciate actually gets a shield from the opponent. The Glaciate is rebanked, and now in comes Clodsire. Clodsire is just so bulky, even though it's taking super effective damage from the Chilling Waters. They're already debuffed, so the Chilling Water is not going to do a lot. The opponent tries to counteract that by firing off the Trailblaze first, and now going for a full power Chilling Water. But now the Clodsire is only at -1, and the Sludge Bomb is going to be inflicting big damage. Back in comes the Jellicent. Opponent taking advantage of the desync timers. Clodsire is always going to be letting this go. Surf won't quite take the knockout, and there's a pivot into Corviknight. So Clodsire does have a Sludge Bomb stored for later in the game. Corviknight going to take some pretty significant damage from Shadow Ball, and not having a Ghost Resist on this team means that Jellicent is just so incredibly powerful. The Jellicent did actually end up going for a Surf bait there, so Corviknight took a little bit less damage than expected, but they do end up shielding up the payback, and man, this Jellicent is just running away with this game. Jellicent gonna fire off another Surf, it barely misses the knockout, in comes Florges, unable to snipe down with the Fairy Wind, as Corviknight will make the Air Cutter. Air Cutter takes the knockout, but the Jellicent is still around. Jellicent can't get the Hex down, as Corviknight is able to make another Air Cutter. That's going to be getting the Jellicent low. In comes Kyurem. Kyurem can't quite get the farm down, forced to put up the shield, but Kyurem does have a lot of energy. Hopefully, this will be enough to KO whatever's in back. In the back, they have a Fearow, and this game is somehow going to be a win. That Jellicent felt absolutely unbeatable throughout the course of this game, but somehow the Jellicent was KO'd, and then the Fearow in the back just got absolutely destroyed by back-to-back Glaciates. It looks like the opponent ended up closing out of their app, and I can't blame them. I'd probably have a pretty similar reaction if I saw a Kyurem in the Great League. Picking up a pretty bad lead in the next match, Kyurem into Shadow Magnezone. Shadow Magnezone is a complete wall to energy from Kyurem, and Mirror Shot will be deadly. Kyurem puts up the shield. Mirror Shot does have a chance to debuff. It does not come through, and now Kyurem will look to return fire with the Glaciate. Glaciate is resisted, but Magnezone will still take quite a lot of damage. Magnezone able to hang on, make a second Mirror Shot, and Kyurem has had to go down 2 shields very early. There's the debuff, in comes Golisopod. Golisopod going to be answered with Corviknight, but a Golisopod up 2 shields should actually do quite well here. Aqua Jet lands, that does quality damage onto the Corviknight. Corviknight can return fire with the Air Cutter. This is super effective damage, but Air Cutter is not known for its damage, so even though it gets the boost, Golisopod just simply does not have the shield. Golisopod fires off another Aqua Jet. That's going to be getting Corviknight very, very low. Corviknight takes extra Shadow Claws to put itself as low as possible before firing off the Air Cutter. Opponent's just going to sacrifice Golisopod to set up a 2-shield Shadow Primeape, and if there's anything scarier than that in the Go Battle League, I have not met it. In comes Kyurem. Kyurem needs debuffs immediately. First Glaciate gets the debuff. There's the catch, able to save the second Glaciate for later. That is a very important catch. The opponent able to immediately put their attack back to normal. If the opponent has Ice Punch, things could get tricky very, very quickly. But they don't. They have Rage Fist instead. They're now going to be a +1 attack. Nice turn weight from the Clodsire, making sure that this will land on its intended target and forcing Primeape to put up the final shield. Primeape will have to reveal its nuke move here. It is boosted. Is it the close combat? Yes, it is. That lands. Clodsire survives, but it gets farmed down. In comes Kyurem. Kyurem waits the turn and will secure the knockout with the Glaciate. The game comes down to this. Will Kyurem be able to Dragon Breath down a Magnezone? Shadow Magnezone? No! It gets farmed down, and that game will end in defeat. We've got a Battle of Dragons in the next match. Kyurem and Shelgon. I'm not quite sure who wins Charge Attack priority here, but I assume it's going to be the Kyurem. Kyurem makes the Glaciate, but we're not going to find out. Opponent able to save the Shelgon and get the catch of the Glaciate onto the Shadow Fortress. This is a Volt Switch Fortress, and that means after rebanking the Glaciate, it's Clodsire time. Clodsire will take super effective from the Sand Tomb, but it double resists the Volt Switches, and that makes this matchup incredibly dominant. Sand Tomb number 2, the speed of Fortress is just absolutely relentless, but even after 2 Sand Tombs, the Clodsire is still not even into the yellow HP. Clodsire going to be full, sending the Earthquake, looking for damage. Earthquake connects, and that takes the knockout. Back in comes the Shelgon, but Shelgon's Twister will fail to secure the KO here. Twister is a pretty good move, but this is a Clodsire. Clodsire hangs on, fires off the Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb is going to be no-shielded. In comes Kyurem, and Kyurem snipes it down. Whatever's in the back is guaranteed to be debuffed, and it's going to be Empoleon. The opponent doesn't know it yet, but this game is over. Empoleon is just getting double debuffed. they're never going to be shielding the glaciates because they're double resisted, but now they just have no ability to inflict any kind of damage. So they get the farm down just for the grand reveal that it's Corviknight in the back. In comes Corviknight, and you can just see the Empoleon. They don't want to play anymore, and they will resign the match. Here's a matchup I thought I'd never see in the Open Great League. This looks like a Master League battle, Shadow Garchomp into Kyurem, but no, this is just the Great League in 2026. Kyurem able to slightly outpace, fire off the Glaciate. There's a beautiful Sand Tomb catch, able to preserve that Kyurem and catch onto the Corviknight. Corviknight's going to be answered with the Jellicent, but the opponent's at a very tough spot. Jellicent is down a shield, and it's down a little bit of energy as well. So even though this Corviknight is debuffed, Corviknight can utilize the shield advantage to ensure that it guaranteed lands a payback onto the Jellicent. Jellicent gets the shield call right, shielding up the payback, but unfortunately, Corviknight can just double shield, make the payback, and this is going to deal devastating damage onto the Jellicent. Jellicent does have some pretty good bulk, but it's taken quite a lot of damage already from these sand attacks. I don't know if it can hang on, and it cannot. Payback lands, taking the knockout, as Empoleon is revealed as the final Pokemon. Empoleon fires off the Hydro Cannon instantly, and Clodsire will be able to win the zeros against Empoleon by surviving a Hydro Cannon. In comes Clodsire, there's the pivot into the Garchomp, answered with the Kyurem, but oh no, Kyurem gets farmed down, and now Garchomp gets the Sand Tomb to Clodsire. Clodsire's win con is to try and Poison Sting down. Clodsire does get the Poison Sting down, needs to outpace the Empoleon, but can't outpace. Clodsire is debuffed. Can it survive the Hydro? I don't think it can. Hydro lands, down goes Clodsire. Close game, but it will end in defeat. We move to the next match, picking up what I imagine should be a pretty nice lead, Kyurem into Credilli. The reason why I think Kyurem is favored here, even though both parties are hitting each other for super effective damage, is just the pacing. Kyurem gets to the Glaciate before Credilli makes it to the Rock Tomb. Credilli no shields the Glaciate and pays a very heavy price, whereas the Kyurem is going to be shielding. Kyurem can't quite get the farm down due to the debuff, will fire off the last second Glaciate. Glaciate is going to be shielded, and this is a -2 Rock Tomb. Can Kyurem actually hang on here? Kyurem's going to be no shielding. Rock Tomb lands, that gets it low. Kyurem farms down. Opponent sends in a Talonflame, and Kyurem gets a Glaciate debuff onto the Talonflame. I'm starting to understand why this mod got banned. This mod would be absolutely ridiculous if it was allowed in the Open Great League. Oh my goodness. The power of Kyurem is just absurd. In comes Clodsire, firing off the Sludge Bomb, getting the shield. In the back is a Jellicent. And I feel like it's been a common theme in this video. Jellicent's being down a shield against Corviknight, and it just never goes well. Shadow Ball lands because Corviknight just simply does not care. All it needs is to land that payback. No Protect shields remaining means this payback is connecting devastating damage onto the Jellicent. Jellicent is going to be winning charge attack priority over that Corviknight. Corviknight just going to let itself get KO'd as Shadow Ball will take the knockout. Back in comes the Talonflame, and it looks like that may have been a charge attack priority tie. Talonflame is the back-to-back. Shield comes up on the fly, and it was a charge attack priority tie. Talonflame is at the back-to-back, but they're just not going to get the chance. Sludge Bomb takes the knockout. Jellicent is so low that it's getting poison stung down by a Clodsire. Oh, that is a tough way to go out as Jellicent. But for Maki, it's going to be yet another win. We've got the Battle of Ice types in the next match. Kyurem into a Leafage Abomasnow. Opponent safe switches into Azumarill. They tried for a Glaciate catch, but instead the Azumarill is going to be swiftly answered with the Sludge Bomb Clodsire. They farmed up a ton of energy, and they do have it! They full send the Hydro Pump, and just like that, Clodsire loses a massive amount of HP. Clodsire returns fire with the Sludge Bomb, barely able to survive the bubble damage to make Sludge Bomb number 2. Now the opponent will have to invest a shield if they want switch advantage, and they are going to do just that. But in comes Corviknight. Opponent saves the Azumarill and pivots back into the Abomasnow. Abomasnow lands the Weather Ball, that's gonna hurt. Corviknight immediately firing off this Air Cutter. The tricky thing is if you ever bring back in the Kyurem, then you're gonna be switch locked and there's gonna be an Azumarill in your future. So bringing in the Kyurem does have some consequences. Kyurem shields up the Weather Ball, gets the farm down. The Azumarill has taken quite a lot of damage. They send it in, but it's immediately going to be hit with the Glaciate. Glaciate only going to be single resisted, and Azumarill hangs on. It survives the Glaciate. It's going to be able to force the shield with the player off. In the back, they have Morpeko, and Morpeko is going to be immediately debuffed. Add to that the fact that they only have access to Electric or Wheel until they fire off a charge attack, and this poor Morpeko is just getting torn to smithereens. Glaciate after Glaciate absolutely destroying Morpeko. Kyurem farms down, and the opponent is going to resign the match. Hopping to the final match, Kyurem into Jumpluff. Now this matchup is going to be a little bit interesting. Jumpluff obviously has super effective damage with Fairy Wind, but the relentless 10-turn pacing of Glaciate on Kyurem means Kyurem just lands a Glaciate before any damage can be done. Jumpluff no-shielded paid a heavy price. They go for the acrobatics, and now they pivot into Shadow Drapion. Jumpluff plus Drapion was a very popular core about a year ago, and honestly, I do miss that meta a little bit. I felt like it was a very cool meta. Gonna bank energy on the Kyurem, send in the Corviknight, and Corviknight is just gonna be used as a damage sponge, as the debuffed Drapion is not gonna be able to come close to two-shotting like it normally would. In addition, the Jumpluff has taken so much damage already that if they switch that back in, it's just gonna get knocked out by the Air Cutter, so they're kind of forced into bringing in their third. They're waiting down the timer. They know they're in a very tough spot. They bring in more Morpeko. Oh my goodness, what a catch. They get the Peekaboo catch, catching the payback, but unfortunately this Morpeko is just going to get debuffed into oblivion. Morpeko will be firing off the electric aura wheel, desperately trying to undo the debuffs, but Kyurem just gets to put those debuffs right back. So Kyurem applies the debuffs. Kyurem's going to be no shielding aura wheel, even at -1 and resisted, takes the knockout, but the reveal, it's Clodsire in the back. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Well, after seeing that footage, I can confidently say I understand why Niantic put out bans for these legendary Pokemon that were not supposed to be in the Great League. Now, some of them really don't translate particularly well, whether that's like a Lunala or a Zacian ground form, but a few translate exceedingly well. But I would say those are Kyurem in its base form, and as well as Virizion and Cobalion, somewhat to a lesser extent, Xerneas and Yveltal, but I would say those top three, Kyurem, Virizion, and the Cobalion, are the three that they have to be very careful if they are ever Great League eligible, because they do have pretty solid stat products. For Kyurem, part of what it is a really unique typing and an ability to debuff every 10 turns. That pacing is incredibly fast and allows it to function as basically a better Arctobax. When it comes to Virizion and Cobalion, I think that they have the most potential of any of the legendaries to have Great League impact, as they have pretty massive stat products already in the Ultra League, and that ends up translating very nicely to the Great League. So they're very bulky, they have incredibly efficient charge stacks, and they have really good pacing. And if you're bulky and you have good pacing, well, that's a pretty consistent recipe to success in the Open Great League. Now, Virizion does suffer a little bit from lack of coverage, like it's pretty bad into the flyers, and Stone Edge is kind of expensive to get to, and Cobalion would have its issues with ghost types, but they would both be pretty strong neutrally. They could both potentially opt for close combat, although I think close combat would be stronger on the Virizion. But by accidentally having these legendaries available as Great League for a little bit, they kind of opened Pandora's box a little bit. And with these bans, they are trying to close Pandora's box once again, because once that lid is opened and Pokemon like these are unleashed out of the Great League, I think they're going to be good for quite some time to come. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed watching it, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support guys provide to the channel is sincerely appreciated. Thank you guys oh so very much. I'm gonna go drink some tea because my voice is shot after today. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.